Buckle up, because this isn't just a rant, it's a battle cry for every hardworking realtor who feels blindsided by what I can only describe as a legal ambush of epic proportions. Welcome to another fiery episode about the lawsuit that is rocking the real estate industry, where I'm not just speaking the truth, I am shouting it from the rooftops. Today, I'm diving into the controversy that is shaking the very foundations of the real estate industry. What we do is important work, and I'm not going to let anyone in the public say otherwise. And then along comes a decision that threatens to burn down everything that we've built. I wanted to know more about the attorneys who represented the plaintiffs, because I haven't heard very much about it in the news. So I've spent the last week researching, and I was absolutely shocked to learn that the lawyer who represented the plaintiffs, who represented the Burnett's in this case, was a personal injury lawyer. That's right. The guy on the side of the road with a big billboard that says, "Hurt in a wreck? Call me. No money if you don't win," what some people would not so lovingly refer to as ambulance chasers. This attorney has launched an all-out war, an assault on the real estate industry, alleging things like collusion and price fixing. It's the most ridiculous argument I have ever heard. If only he knew how the real estate industry worked instead of being told by people who don't know what they're talking about. He's alleging that listing agents and buyer's agents get together and they collude on how to fix prices to gouge people out of their dream of being homeowners and profiting through buying and selling real estate. He says that we are conspiring to inflate commissions in the industry and line our own pockets at the expense of the consumer. And to add insult to injury, they're painting us as the villains in this narrative instead of the attorney who actively went out and solicited all of these plaintiffs to create a giant class action lawsuit. And don't misunderstand, this is only the beginning. This isn't about him wanting housing to be more affordable for more Americans. No, this was a calculated attack on our industry. This is an assault on our integrity. It's an affront to me personally, and I hope that it is to you as well. All of you who have dedicated your lives to serving others, helping people in your community, and they're saying that there's some grand conspiracy where we all get together and work on price fixing. It's ridiculous. And let me be perfectly clear, I'm not just going to sit here and take it. And I have tons of comments from you that feel the exact same way. So I'm glad that we're all banding together to say no. This isn't right, and we're not just going to roll over and lie down. Do you roll over and lie down, or do you lie down and then roll over? I, for one, am not going to take this lying down. I'm going to stand up, I'm going to expose the truth, and I'm going to tackle all of these ridiculous accusations one by one. So to every realtor listening who feels betrayed by NAR, who feels like you are being attacked, who feels like this is a calculated attempt to put us out of business, I say this: you are not alone. We are in this together. And as a group, we will collectively fight back. I'm going to play you some excerpts from a podcast episode that I recently heard from Planet Money. Now, I had never heard of this show before until I started doing my research, and listening to some of the snide comments by the people who host this podcast, they were downright obnoxious. But then I saw who runs this podcast. It's NPR. So I guess I shouldn't really be surprised. They clearly were agreeing with every word that fell from this man's lips. Nobody pushed back. Nobody challenged him. Nobody said, "But is that really true? And where are you getting this information?" These podcast hosts are clearly not reporters. They just took this man at face value and listened to everything he said and nodded their heads and agreed. At least I'm assuming that's what they did, since it was a podcast and there was no video. So let's listen.
Scott and Rhonda Burnett, the couple that Mike Ketchmark had agreed to represent, did not like how things had gone down when they sold their home. They especially didn't like the part where 3% of the proceeds from the sale had gone to the real estate agent who represented the buyers, the people who bought their home.
But for a court to consider this illegal, Mike was going to have to prove that there had been some kind of conspiracy between agents on the seller's side and agents on the buyer's side to keep that commission high.
There's a law, it's the Sherman Antitrust Act, that says that you cannot join with competitors to follow a system that's designed to inflate or stabilize prices.
Mike starts digging, and pretty quickly it becomes apparent to him that what had happened to Rhonda and Scott Burnett wasn't just some isolated case. They were not the only ones who had paid an inflated fee and didn't really seem to have much choice about it.
We started investigating this and saw that this was happening statewide in Missouri, and it was a system-wide practice, so we decided to expand the class.
Within months of joining the case, Mike and the team expanded it to a statewide class action representing 500,000 Missourians. And they weren't just going to sue the two companies that had worked on the Burnett's house sale, but all told, 4 of the country's largest realtor franchises, companies like Keller Williams and Home Services of America, and also the National Association of Realtors.
I had never heard of the National Association of Realtors. And when I started looking into it, I thought, wait a minute, they're the largest lobbyist in the country, bigger than Big Pharma, bigger than the NRA, than all of these organizations? And the answer is yes.
So many things about this piss me off. First of all, calling NAR the biggest lobbyist in the country. NAR exists for one reason, and that is to protect the consumer. When they go to Washington and they lobby our politicians who are making all kinds of laws that will affect how our people are able to buy and sell real estate, when they have no idea what they're talking about because they've never worked in this profession before, they're not lobbying for us to be able to make more money, for us to be able to keep our commissions high. They are lobbying for the consumer. They're advocating for personal property rights. They're not advocating for us. And maybe that's part of the problem. They are advocating for the consumers. They are making sure that the consumer doesn't get the shaft by laws that are passed by people that have no idea what the consequences will be of their decisions. Next is how he very strategically decided to frame his argument when he was going to present it in court. The home sellers didn't like that they decided to sell their home. They spoke to a listing agent, probably more than one, I would assume, but at least one, because one of them ended up listing the house. This listing agent most likely sat down and went through all of the paperwork with them and described how it was all going to work, what I was going to do, what they would be responsible for, who was going to pay what, how the money was going to be divvied out. It is on pages and pages and pages in a legally binding contract. In no way did they not have the opportunity to read and understand what they were signing. If they didn't read it, that's on them. I'm sure that everything was laid out to them. They put their house on the market, it sold, it closed. And then later they said, I really don't like how that went down. I didn't like that I had to pay a commission to the buyer's side. First of all, you never had to pay a commission to the buyer's side. It was recommended that that's what you do by the listing agent in order to get as many buyers to come see your home as possible. I'm sure this listing agent probably didn't go into great detail of why the system is set up the way that it is. Maybe they did. I don't know. I wasn't sitting there in the kitchen at the time of the appointment. But the fact remains, they agreed to the terms when they signed the legally binding contract. The deal was completed. They got what they wanted. And then they decided, I don't actually really like how that happened. So this attorney gets a call from another attorney friend and says, hey, I want you to come in and work on this case with me. And he decides to frame this practice as illegal because he feels like that has the best chance of being agreed upon by the court and ruling in their favor. He says that the competitors all collectively join together and have awesome conversations about price fixing. I don't know about you, but in my brokerage, in all of brokerages that I've worked at in the past, we weren't even allowed to discuss commission numbers. And we certainly didn't all go out to lunch and say, hey, I'm going to charge this much. How much are you going to charge? Let's all charge the same price so that we can say this is industry standard and then everybody will make the most amount of money. That is illegal. Nobody does that. In fact, real estate's kind of a cutthroat business. We are all competing for the same buyers and sellers to work with. And most of the time, in order to be more competitive, a lot of people cut their commission. If I'm up against 4 other people, they're all doing it at a higher rate, and I'm willing to discount my commission in order to get the business. That happens all the time. People don't inflate the commission in order to win the client. They typically reduce the commission in order to win the client. His argument makes no sense. It is not in my best interest to call a competitor and agree that we will charge the same thing. No, if I'm a cutthroat agent, and there are a lot of you out there, the cutthroat agent is like, I'm going to cut that commission. I'm going to steal that business out from the other person. They're not even going to know what hit them. I had a friend in town last week who's from New Jersey, and she had just taken a listing at 4%. That is what she felt was reasonable in her area based on her high housing prices. She felt that 4% was going to be plenty of a commission based on what the listing price and the sale price of the house was going to be. She felt that 6% was too much. She chose to list it at 4%. Are other people in town listing at 6? Yes, I'm sure there are. And probably 5, and probably 3, and probably 2, and probably 7 as well. There is no such thing as price fixing in this industry. This is a fantasy on behalf of this little attorney who is a personal injury attorney and has no working knowledge of the real estate industry prior to taking this case. But here's probably my favorite part about all of this. I just find this so hypocritical because how does a personal injury attorney get paid? They work on contingency just like we do. They say, I will take your case. I will represent you. If I don't win in court, you don't pay me $1. If I win in court, you pay me a percentage. That's exactly how real estate works. They hire us. We work for free. If the deal never closes, if the house never sells, if the buyer can't get approved, the buyer never finds a house, the buyer is in a multiple offer situation for 1.5 years and they finally give up and just decide to keep renting. All of that time that we worked for them has been in vain. We have not made $1. We only get paid when the transaction is successfully completed. And that's exactly what he does in his industry as well. So I find it extremely hypocritical that he's criticizing us for the way that we charge commissions when he does the exact same thing in his business, only he doesn't charge 4 to 6%. I did a quick Google search and I said, how much do personal injury attorneys usually make? And the average is 33% of what you are awarded. So if you're awarded $100,000 by the judge, they take 33% on average. There is a range. It looks like 25 to 45 is the standard range, but the average is around 33%. Same as in the real estate industry. There is a range, but there is a typical average for your market. Where my friend is in a high cost area, it's not 6%. When I lived in California, it was not 6%. There is a range of what is considered reasonable and customary, but everybody gets to charge whatever the heck they want. There is no price fixing. There is no collusion. That is a hill I'm willing to die on. The next thing he did that was actually kind of ingenious, and I would love to know if our attorneys did this as well, was he held mock trials. He says he randomly picked 24 people off the street, pulled them in, put them in a faux jury box, made their arguments, and then wanted to see whether they would rule in favor of the plaintiff or the defendant. Every time they did a mock trial, if they ruled in favor of the defendant, who was NAR and all of the brokerages involved, then he said, oh, I got to change up my argument because that didn't fly. And he kept doing this over and over again until every single time they ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Did you ever watch that TV show Bull? It had Michael Weatherly in it, who will be forever known as Tony DiNozzo from NCIS, but he was in it, and that's what this whole TV show was about, how they would have mock trials to practice so that when they went into court, they knew exactly what to say, and they had a very high degree of certainty how the people in the jury would rule. But apparently NAR just showed up all of their attorneys en masse. This guy said that there'd be like 187 people sitting at their table and 2 or 3 people sitting at the table for the plaintiffs. I obviously was not present for the trial. I was not in the room. I've never seen any footage of it. I don't know how it all went down, but hearing him describe it on this podcast, it makes it sound that we looked like a bunch of a-holes. We went in our 3-piece suits, carrying our $500 briefcases, looking smug, like we haven't done anything wrong. You're totally going to lose this case. And he looked like the underdog. And guess what? He took NAR's attorneys down. They failed to prepare, and this guy decimated them in court. He even pulled in a whole bunch of training videos from sessions that brokerages had for their agents in their offices. We all do this. We go to training sessions all the time, right? Now, these training sessions were not about how to swindle the customer. They were how to present the commission that you charge, what you will do for that commission, and stand your ground when it comes to the negotiation. They were trying to show people how to be so confident in the value that you provide that when they try to negotiate down, and they do, that you would feel comfortable saying, this is what I charge, and I'm not going to reduce it. It was not so that you could swindle the customer. It was so that you would not feel like you had to discount your service every single time someone asked because you were not convinced of the value that you brought to the table. Because in other industries, people don't negotiate. Like, I've never gone to get my hair cut and said, how much is that going to be? Well, how about if you don't use shampoo and conditioner, you stick my head in the sink and you get my hair wet, but you don't actually wash it. Will you knock $10 off the price? Who does that? But in the real estate industry, it happens every single day. I've had buyers ask me for a rebate from my commission so that they'd have more money for closing costs. I've had sellers ask me to reduce their commission, either just because they wanted to save some money or they didn't have a lot of equity in their home. They were not going to walk away with a big fat profit, and they will ask. So these training sessions were how to present what you're going to do for them in a way that you were over delivering on every expectation that they had so that they would be thrilled with the results and be happy to pay your fee because they were going to sell the home for so much more money that it basically pays the fee out of the proceeds of the sale. That's how we pitch it to FSBOs, right? If you could sell it yourself for $100,000, but you list with an agent for $150,000 and that's what it sells for, then the extra money paid my fee. It's basically gravy to you. It's not coming out of your pocket because if you had sold it on your own, you wouldn't have made the extra $50,000.
But Mike was like, this isn't about the quality of the service. It's about collusion, whether or not the real estate agents were getting together and agreeing on prices, which is bad for consumers.
Now, Mike, he did not want to do some long, boring explanation about how competition works. He wanted to use an example that the jury could relate to, like buying chicken for a barbecue.
The way I described it to the jury is, if you think about it, like if you have 5 companies that are chicken producers, they can't get together and say they're going to charge $5 a pound on chicken. It's just against the law. It's collusion.
Mike says the same rules apply to realtors, no matter how happy their customers might be.
Well, that's like saying people at my barbecue were happy because the chicken tasted good. That doesn't matter, right? I mean, like, you can't do that. It's not the free market.
And Mike, nobody does that. The fact that you think that's what happens just makes my blood boil because that's not what happens. Nobody does that. There may be, out of 1.5 million people, are there a handful of people who may have done that? Maybe. They are clearly breaking the law and they should be held accountable. But to say that the entire industry is corrupt because a handful of people out of 1.5 million may have engaged in that behavior is ridiculous. I still can't believe that NAR lost this case because of this argument right here. This doesn't hold any water. It should have been so easy to disprove this argument, and yet we got our butts handed to us.
Next, Mike went after the argument that clients could always negotiate their agent's commission.
You know what's even more compelling than a folksy metaphor about barbecue or football? A startling piece of video evidence. On the second day of the trial, Mike played a video featuring the CEO of Home Services of America, a guy named Gino Blafari, at a presentation training realtors from different companies to insist on a 6% or more commission.
For example, when home sellers saw that I had written in a 6% commission into the contract and would ask Gino, aren't commissions negotiable? I would always answer confidently, yes, commissions are negotiable, but I can only go up.
Then Mike played a video of his deposition with Gino Blafari, asking about this training video.
Do you believe it's appropriate to get a group of competitors in the real estate industry together and tell them to write 6% in on the commission line and then to tell the buyer it's negotiable but it only goes up? Do you believe that that's appropriate?
It's a generic training.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't think whether it's generic or not, it's not my question. I'm asking you if it's appropriate.
That probably was a really bad move. I remember when I first started in real estate, my broker said, you do not show up to the listing presentation with a number filled in the commission line, because that makes it seem that it is not negotiable, especially if it was auto-filled in our software. So it's typed onto the form. He said, don't do that. You have to leave it blank. Now, when you go to the listing presentation and they say, I only want to pay you 1%, you can absolutely say, I'm sorry, I can't work for that little. I need to be compensated for my time, for my expertise, for my knowledge, for my counsel, for my advice, for my negotiation strategies, and I need to be reimbursed for all of the money that I'm going to spend to market your home. I'm not willing to do it for so little. You'll have to find somebody else, and you're free to get up and walk away. You can absolutely do that every single time. But I believe that that was a real mistake to tell people to put that into the contract before you even show up at the house. And clearly, the jury felt the same way. Then they played another recording of someone telling a story about a top-selling agent in his brokerage that, well, you got to hear it for yourself.
You might want to write this down if you have your iPhone. Is first of all, the technique is profanity laced, but I'm not going to use any of the swear words because I'm not going to end my career today. I mean, here's a technique. There's no bleeping way I'm going to cut my bleeping commission. What do you think? I'm a bleeping hooker standing outside the Lincoln Tunnel at 3 o'clock in the morning giving bleepings to sailors? If you think I'm going to cut my bleeping commission, you can take this home and shove it up your bleeping, and I know that it will fit, right? Did everyone get that?
Oh, yes, I think everybody heard him loud and clear. When this played in the courtroom, people were like, oh. The realtor's side said that not only was this video totally vulgar, it wasn't even on the exhibit list. So they tried to get the judge to declare a mistrial, but motion denied.
It's a smoking gun. It's like you're accusing somebody of robbing a bank and you got a video of them doing it.
So that certainly didn't help our case either, did it? It made us sound like our entire profession, we just are money-grubbing, self-serving, self-important real estate agents lining our own pockets at the expense of the clients. I can't even imagine ever saying something like that to a potential client. But again, one person does not speak for 1.5 million. And that's just people who are members of NAR. What about all the real estate agents who are not? To say that one person's behavior, one person's foul mouth speaks for the entire industry is just not true. It is wrong. And no wonder we have such a bad reputation right now, if that's what the consumer thinks of us as a whole. I'm especially concerned because this attorney has now said he is actively finding more clients for a nationwide class action lawsuit. This one was just people in Missouri. Now he's looking for people all over the country. He said something like he expects to have between 40 and 50 million plaintiffs, people that sold their house, who felt like they paid too much. You know those TV commercials and radio commercials you say, were you or a loved one stationed at Camp Lejeune between 1952 and 1987 and you were exposed to contaminated water? You may be entitled to compensation. That's what he's doing. He's probably doing radio commercials. He's probably mailing postcards. In fact, some of you in the comments have said you've already seen the postcards going out. The original NAR lawsuit, that's only the beginning. This guy has dollar signs in his eyes for a huge payday, getting on the cover of National Law Review magazine or whatever their association's journals are. This guy wants to become the poster child for the little guy who took down the entire real estate industry. I'm also hearing rumors that even though the NAR proposed this settlement, that the DOJ is not going to accept it. The Department of Justice absolutely wants commissions to be decoupled. And what I'm being told is that even though NAR said this is what we propose, they don't think the DOJ is going to accept it. What I want to know is what the heck does the DOJ have to do with any of this? They were not a party in the lawsuit. They were not part of the plaintiffs. They were not part of the defendants. They have nothing to do with this lawsuit. So why are they inserting themselves in this industry? Why? When did this all start? It was 2019 when the Burnett's approached the attorneys about this whole idea for a lawsuit in the first place. But the DOJ didn't get involved until after that, right? Maybe if we had a real estate developer in the White House, we would have been a little more protected. What do you think? So many of you have asked me, what do I think about all this? What do I predict is going to happen? And how do I feel about NAR? I think that I am less mad at NAR right now than I am at their legal team. I feel like their legal team, as well paid as they must have been, completely dropped the ball. It sounds to me like they went into this lawsuit so sure of themselves that they probably failed to prepare adequately. I know NAR's mission is to protect the consumer, but they also have an obligation to protect their 1.5 million dues-paying members. We pay a lot of money every single year to be part of NAR. A lot of us donate a lot of money to RPAC, the Political Action Committee. I feel like they had an obligation to protect us every bit as much as they were protecting the consumer. I know a lot of you feel like they threw us under the bus. Comments like these have been popping up on all of my videos for weeks now. You feel like they were perfectly willing to take our dues every single year, but yet when push come to shove, they did not adequately represent our interests. They let some guy who had no knowledge of the real estate industry present an argument that was blatantly false, and somehow he won. I'm angry that they didn't do more to argue for the reason why the commission structure is the way that it is and has been for something like 100 years. There's a reason why it is set up the way that it is. And clearly they did not do a good enough job convincing the jury of why that is. And I'm really upset about this because I am a major donor to RPAC. So I feel like all of this money that I've invested into them over the years just got flushed down the toilet. I suspect we're going to see a lot of members leave. If their brokerage doesn't require that they be a realtor, then I think we're going to see a lot of people say, I'm just going to save my money because what have you done for me? Give me a discount on car rentals. Give me a 5% discount on my cell phone bill. Give me free training that I can get from my brokerage anytime. I like NAR. I have gone to the national conferences. I have spoken there. I've done webinars with them. I like NAR as an organization. However, for hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year, to not feel like they adequately have your back, I think a lot of people are going to walk away. And I would not be surprised at all if they end up having to declare bankruptcy. Between the scandals with the presidency over the last couple of years and now this, it would not surprise me at all if they just have to declare bankruptcy and close up shop. In the real estate industry, we are nickeled and dimed to death. I have felt that way since the day I entered it in 2005, and I have never changed my opinion since then. We are charged for literally every single thing that we do, which is why we charge what we charge. I don't just charge the money to make a profit. I have to also cover all of my business expenses, which are a lot. If I'm representing the buyer, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of gas going in the car. There are hours and hours and hours and hours being spent. There are weekends with my small children that I will never get back because I was working with the clients from morning until night. We have to make it worth our while. We have to not only get reimbursed for expenses, actual business expenses, but then we have to make a profit on top of it. And we don't get health insurance. We don't have a pension. We don't have benefits of any kind. We are completely self-employed. We are taxed out the yin yang. And we have to split a portion of every commission check with the brokerage that we're affiliated with. So even when you say, well, I paid 3% to the buyer side and it was $12,000, we are not anywhere close to taking home $12,000. If you're representing the seller, you're also paying all of your marketing out of that. The advertising, the Facebook ads, the pay-per-click ads, back in the day, we would put ads in the newspaper for open houses. We would spend money on mailing stuff to everybody in the neighborhood to let them know that your house was for sale so they could tell all of their friends. Every single thing that we do costs us money. And if members don't feel like the association has their back, they're going to save their $500 or $600, aren't they? So NAR, if you are able to remain in business and you don't file bankruptcy and you somehow manage to keep it together, just know that your members are going to expect a lot more of you in the future. We don't want crappy discounts on products and services that we'll probably never use. We want to know that you are out there protecting us, that you are advocating for us, not hiring Elizabeth Banks to do a cute little TV commercial series that doesn't adequately explain to the consumer what realtors are and how we work. And I, for one, want you to advocate for us every bit as hard as you advocate for the consumers.